Ah, my friends, welcome back. It's been too long, wouldn't you agree? Don't mind me. I was just practicing a couple of incantations that I got from our nice sisters over at that house. You know the house. Of course you do, because you came back to see what's happening over there with your favorite corn bearers. It seems things are getting lively over there. So, how about you strap in and sit back, and let's dig deeper into the lives or deaths of our good friends. This is part 3, A Halloween's Tale, a game of snakes and apples. A game of snakes and apples, part 3. Sacrifice, huh? Well, shit, Max said after hawking a loogie. He glanced at Lex, who stared back at him with a look of "how do you want to play it" written all over his face. The men had survived the explosion in the kitchen, making their way down the west side of the giant house. They were checking rooms and coming up with a plan to survive the night when a watcher appeared out of nowhere and told them it was the 11th hour. The spin took place in front of them. The hands on the stone little girl's disc landed on the symbol of a dying lady. Lex blew out air while leaning against the wall of the corridor looking up at the ceiling, mind full of thoughts. He grabbed at his back and his side as he stretched, feeling the pain, aches, and wounds from his fight with the monster earlier. Adrenaline and the will to live had blocked out his ability to feel any damage he was taking in the heat of the moment. But now, like a younger sibling begging for your attention, the pain would no longer be ignored. 10 minutes, old school. How you want to play it? Lex said calmly with a slight smile. Max chuckled and thought to himself, this mofo really went toe-to-toe with a real-life monster and now has no problem dancing with me if I decide that's the route I want to take. He chuckled again. A ranger through and through. Well, Lex, I reckon we can have a knife fight and see who pokes who up first. Or, he nodded to the stone child, who was standing so still and so quiet that if someone hadn't spent time in this hell house, would think she was actually a statue. We wait for her to pick a poor soul. Lex nodded slightly. Watcher, I have some questions for you if you would be so kind. The little girl's head snapped to lock eyes with Lex. Speak, coin bearer, she said so coldly. So anytime tonight that symbol comes up in the game, one of the remaining people left in the house has to die in 10 minutes, or you pick someone to die? Am I right so far? The watcher nodded yes. It occurred to Lex that just then the different watchers had different personalities. The one he met at the start of the night came off as a child who loved to talk. This one, not so much. How will I know if somebody has already been killed or if the quota has been met? The watcher blinked in silence for several long seconds before answering. All watchers are connected, and it's our job to keep eyes on you cornbreaders at all times. We know the moment one of you is slain. Furthermore, we are bound by the rules of the game to let you know immediately the results. Max spoke up after the watcher was done explaining. Lex, this shit ain't gotta be too damn hard. We let him pick. Either we live to keep going, or we don't, he said flatly. Lex nodded in agreement before speaking. And if we both made it to the end and this symbol pops back up? Max smiled. Well, Ranger, we'll cross that blood-stained bridge when we get there, I guess. If we get there, Lex chimed in with a laugh. On the east side of the house, Tammy sat on the floor and looked up at Blair. This game is fucking nuts. It never occurred to either of them that the dying lady would be picked so early in the night. The women stared at each other in silence before Blair broke eye contact. She shifted her gaze up to the watcher floating in midair. How do you pick who dies if we don't pick? I have no choice in the matter, nor does any watcher really, she said politely. The coins buried in your flesh will decide your fate. One of the coins will glow bright blue, just like my eyes. She pointed a tiny but long finger towards her eyes and tapped her cheek, causing a knocking sound to echo off the walls. That glow will let us know which poor soul's time has come to an end. Terry and Blair looked at each other and nodded and fist bumped in silence. The two had already agreed to let fate decide what would happen next. It seems you two will put your lives in the hands of fate, I see. But what about the third coin bearer, who hugs the shadows? Is this also their will? Terry got to her feet and looked puzzled as her eyes met Blair's. They both searched the darkness both ways down the long hallway looking for any sign of movement. A figure stepped into the light of the torches that lined the walls. Emil was smiling ear to ear while waving a long, blood-encrusted knife back and forth. Ladies, I've been dying to introduce myself. My name is Emil, and I think we can be the best of friends. The two women looked at each other and started backing up slowly. Keep your distance, you sick fuck, Blair snapped. Emil smiled but said nothing. Instead, he slowly started walking forward. Terry yanked at Blair's arm so hard she lost her footing. We gotta go, now. We ain't got shit to fight him with. But Blair couldn't take her eyes off Emil, the way a rabbit can't take his eyes off the snake that's slithering towards it. His aura felt pure evil. It was like he was born to walk the halls of this house, and he had just found his way home. Blair! Terry screamed as fear was taking a hold of her. Blair snapped out of her daze, glanced at Terry and nodded. The two women sprinted at top speed down the corridor. Emil watched them with a wild look in his eyes. He had to suck in spit to stop from drooling on himself. He wiped his mouth with the back of the knife. He was getting so excited it was hard to hide. The chase was his favorite part. He looked up at the watcher who was staring back in silence. He took 2 fingers and put them to his lips and wiggled his tongue in between them before winking at her. He then laughed to himself out loud and started off down the hallway whistling, dragging his knife along the stone walls. In the southern part of the house, Jesse, Daniel, and Hannah stood speechless staring at each other. One of us would have to kill the other, Jesse spoke softly, talking to herself more than to the group. I never thought it would come to this early, Hannah said, looking quite panicked. This is madness, Daniel blurted out. He was sweating and looked extra jumpy. What do we do? His question was met with pure silence. Hannah looked around the room and spotted a glass vase full of withering roses a little ways behind her. I can't afford to die here, she screamed. She quickly made a move for the vase. She picked it up with both hands and slammed it down on the ground, shattering it into pieces. She bent down and rummaged through the broken glass and quickly stood up holding a large, jagged piece. Her eyes were big and wild as she pointed her new weapon at the other two. It won't be me, you assholes, you hear me? It won't be me, she shouted. I'll gut the both of you. Jessie let out a gasp as she slapped her hands over her mouth in shock. Daniel edged forward, his hand outstretched, gesturing her to calm down. Don't come any closer, Daniel. I'll do it. You fucker, I'll do it, I swear. She had worked herself into a fit of panic and rage. She had tears streaming down her face, but her eyes were focused and her chin was set. Daniel could tell she was really ready to kill one of them. He inched closer, and she swiped at his outstretched hand and nicked it. He yanked his arm back and held it up to watch the blood run down his hand and drip to the floor. He put his arm down and locked eyes with Hannah. We don't have to kill each other. After 10 minutes, somebody in the house will randomly be chosen, Hannah. Please. Jessie whimpered. I thought you wanted to get out of this house together. Hannah slowly shook her head from side to side while saying no repeatedly. What I need is money. My life is falling apart. We all have problems, Daniel said before she cut him off. Fuck your problems, she screamed. Is your boss/boyfriend sleeping with your mother? Jessie and Daniel's eyes widened, but neither spoke. Nah, didn't think so. I helped build his businesses from the ground up to what they are today, and he cast me aside for my mother. The houses we made into homes, the cars, the bank accounts. I was so dumb. They're all in his name. I have nothing. My whore mother even tried to sit me down and explain that we can't control who we love. My brothers don't talk to her because they see her for the piece of shit she is, but no, not me. I was the only child on her side. And look how she did me. Ripped my life from up under me. Hannah started crying hard before screaming uncontrollably. Daniel and Jessie looked at her in an awkward silence, not sure what to do next. Hannah took a deep breath and calmed down, wiping her face with the bottom of her tank top. Don't talk to me about problems, she said between breaths. I'm not leaving my life up to no chance. One of you is gonna die right here, right now. She stilled herself and started walking slowly towards the both of them. The watcher in the back of the room flapped her giant stone wings and took to the air. Once she was high over their heads, she simply said, 7 minutes left. "You're psycho," Jessie proclaimed before bolting back into the large closet she was hiding in earlier. She slammed the door shut. In the complete darkness, she held the handle with a tight grip, leaning all of her weight backwards to keep her would-be killer out. Hannah shouted, "Bring your ass out here, Jessie." She shot a glance over at Daniel and lowered her arm holding the glass. She stood up straight, fixed her hair, and forced a smile to look less threatening before speaking. Her voice was even and serious. "Daniel, if that big black guy and that old man aren't dead already, you can bet your ass they will watch each other's back to the end of this game. Same with those two sluts. You need me, and I need you now, okay? You're not getting out of here by yourself, but together, together, we can come out of this both alive and rich." Daniel looked at the ground and pondered in silence before speaking. We would still have to deal with that lunatic that killed that girl in the kitchen. He's still lurking about somewhere." He then looked up to lock eyes with Hannah, who wore a sinister smile, taking his statement as a yes to a partnership. "We will have each other's back, and we'll kill him ourselves if we have to." He nodded slowly in approval. "First thing we need to do, partner?" She nodded towards the closet. "We cannot, under no circumstances, leave our lives up to chance. It's her or us, and I pick us. She's nothing more than a hindrance, a crying mess since we met her. She'll be useless in a fight. Her only value at this point is to be sacrificed so we can keep playing. I tell you what, you can even have her coin, because I already have two, just for good faith. In Hannah's mind, it didn't really matter if he had the other coin, because when the time came, she would betray him and take him anyway." In the closet, Jessie was shaking with fear as she listened to everything being said outside. She was to be killed and wasn't a strong enough person to fight for her own life. She was trembling and sobbing to herself, slowly accepting her fate. Out of nowhere, a voice came from within the darkness of the closet. "Jessie, I did not give you that coin you wear in your hand. Show me the woman I met all those weeks ago in that parking lot." Jessie stood up straight, searched the darkness as the hair on the back of her neck stood up. Whoever you are, no. Please, God, no. I'm sick. See, I'm sick. There is no other person." She started hitting herself inside of the head. "I'm just sick." "No, child," the voice said. "You're not sick at all. You're just hiding the real you from the world. That woman, can survive this. You can." "No," she said, crying. "My doctors say I have multiple personality disorder, but I'm the real one. I'm the one in control." Just then, the doorknob in her hand turned slightly, and the door was yanked open before she slammed it back shut. "Jessie, we are running out of time," Hannah chirped. "Be a good little girl and come out." She pulled hard again, opening the door halfway before Jessie pulled with all her strength to close it again. Jessie started crying. "Please, please help me." "Oh, but I can, my dear. But you must first help yourself." Jessie stopped crying and pondered for a second before saying, How do I bring her out?" The whole closet was illuminated by a blue light. Jessie turned her head to see a sister at night holding up a long blue finger with a bright blue ball radiating from the tip. She looked far older than the other sister of the night. Her eyes were still fully black but sunken in, along with her cheeks. Her hair was white as snow and tied in a bob. With the closet lit up, Jessie could see that it was full of old broken porcelain dolls. Hannah tried to open the door again, and Jessie slammed it shut once more before Hannah yelled out, "Come out, you stupid cunt, we're almost out of time. Daniel, get your ass over here and help me." The sister calmly told Jessie, "Look at me now, my child. She peered into the old woman's eyes, full of darkness, as she blew red smoke into her face. Jessie coughed and looked dazed for a few seconds. Her eyes shined bright red before reverting back to their usual color. The old woman smiled and asked Jessie, "Are you still with me, my dear?" Jessie stood up straight and cracked her neck from side to side. "My name is Vex, and thank you for setting me free. That chump Jessie was gonna get us killed, and all I could do was watch from the shadows because of those stupid meds those stupid ass doctors gave us." "Good. Very good," the old sister said while smiling from ear to ear. "I assume you can handle yourself from here, dear. Show them I picked the right coin bearer to win the game." Vex held the door with one hand and grabbed one of the porcelain dolls with the other. She then smashed it against the wall, breaking it into pieces. She reached down and picked up a sharp, pointed piece of a doll's face and gripped it tightly in her hand as she readied herself. Hannah and Daniel yanked at the door, but Vex simply let it go this time, causing both of them to fall backwards as she exploded through the door screaming. She immediately went after Hannah and got on top of her, and the two immediately started struggling and wrestling, rolling on the floor while trying to stab each other. Daniel got to his feet to help Hannah, but stopped, mouth wide open, as he looked in the closet and saw the old sister of the night staring at him. Her jaw enlarged and dropped down until the tip of her chin was level with her waist. She then let out a blood-curdling scream that made the hairs in the back of his neck stand up. He stood frozen in place from the fear gripping him. There was a flash of brilliant blue light, and she disappeared without a trace. Daniel came back to reality as he heard Hannah moan for help. The watcher, who had been in the room the whole time, spoke and said 1 minute left. Vex, who was on top of Hannah, trying to drive the piece of porcelain into her face, but Hannah was holding her back with one arm, while feeling around on the ground for her own piece of glass. Once she found it, she drove the jagged shard into Vex's leg, causing her to scream out in pain. Once Vex stilled herself, she balled her fist up and punched Hannah in the face, breaking her nose, bouncing her head off the stone floor. While Hannah was loopy from the blow, Vex took the opening to stab Hannah in the eye with the piece of the doll's face, killing her on impact. Daniel watched as Hannah's body went limp and her head fell awkwardly sideways, blood pouring from her eye socket as he could see the light of life fading from her remaining eye. Vex got to her feet, breathing hard. She stared Daniel down as if to say, "I'll kill you too if need be." The watcher spoke. "A sacrifice has been made. You may continue with your night, coin bearers." She flew towards the door and then stopped and turned around. "It only gets harder from here." Daniel and Vex looked at each other in silence before the stone child disappeared beyond the doorway. Vex knelt down and grabbed Hannah's arm and plucked both the coins from the wounds in her hand. She locked eyes with Daniel before speaking. "I get one, you can have the other. Let's call it a trade for safe passage out of this room. You go your way, I go mine." "And if I say no," Daniel said coldly. "Well," Vex said, "that means another body will make this room its final resting place, whether that be mine or yours. But make no mistake, you will work for your prize, Danny boy." She knelt down and yanked out the porcelain piece from Hannah's skull and readied herself. She had a slight limp from the wound in her leg, but still stood up straight, showing Daniel she had plenty of fight left in her soul. He stood in silence for a few moments, weighing his options. "Okay, Jessie, I'll take the deal," Daniel said with a nod. Vex smiled and tossed him a coin. As soon as he caught it, both coins started glowing and left both his and her hands. They floated in midair for a few seconds before they shot in the back of the hands of the corn bearer's hands, digging a new home in their new host. After the pain subsided, Vex spoke. "By the way, Danny boy, I'm no more Jessie than you are, so please don't call me that." Daniel looked confused, but did notice that her whole aura had changed, from the way she stood with confidence of a fighter to the look in her eyes. Something had changed. What do I call you, then?" he said, confused. She smiled at him. "That whiny-ass Jessie is checked out for the night, and good fucking riddance. You can call me Vex." Daniel smiled, but it quickly disappeared and was placed by a look of utter fear. "Vex!" he shouted while waving his hands for her to come here rapidly. "Whoa, Danny boy, don't get weird on me. I just said I was going solo." "No!" he screamed as he pointed behind her. "Turn the fuck around!" Vex turned around to find a woman quietly walking into the room on all fours. She was wearing a tattered and filthy bride's dress with a long veil covering her face. She stood up on two legs, and Vex's eyes traced her from her head down. She was a little shorter than Vex, who was already clearing 6 feet. Her hair was long enough to drag on the floor. It was messy and slimy looking. The veil hid her face completely. She wore a thick rusted chain around her neck with a human heart on the end of it. It looked stitched together, and it looked like it was still beating. But what made Vex nervous was her hands and feet. Both were dark blue and abnormally long. At the end of her fingers and toes, her nails were yellow and black, each one as long as knives. Is this what chased you? I mean, shit, chased Jesse into this room?" Vex nodded slowly. "Yeah, the crazy bitch was running at us full speed on the walls before we hid in this room. I thought earlier she would surely rip the closet apart and kill us, but she never came." The bride took a couple of steps forward. Vex went into fight or flight mode and screamed "fuck this" and ran at the woman and swung her porcelain weapon at the monster, aiming at her throat. The bride bent backwards awkwardly to the point her head almost touched the back of her own feet. Then in an instant, her body made popping and cracking sounds as she straightened her body back upright. She was quicker than Vex realized, and she couldn't dodge the claw that ripped across her chest and sent her flying into the wall. She bounced off and laid motionless on the ground. Daniel, who was trying to be quiet, took a step back and crushed some broken glass under his feet, causing the bride to whip around and stare at him. She got on all fours and bolted right over to him. In a blink of an eye, they were face to face. He turned his head slightly to the side as she examined his face. He could feel the heat of her breath as she was so close. She looked him up and down, gently caressing his now dirty suit and straightening his tie. A sobering thought made Daniel's blood run cold. He was wearing a tux and her a bride's dress. Was she connecting the two? Was she, the thought made him sick, attracted to him? She made clicking noises as she groped him all over. Behind her, Vex slowly got to her feet and coughed loudly as she regained consciousness. The bride whipped around and stretched out her arms on both sides as if she was blocking off Daniel. Then in a raspy voice, she screamed, "Mine!" Daniel tried to beg for help with his eyes, pleading with Vex in silence to not abandon him. Vex took in the situation and winced in pain as she grabbed at her stomach. The woman's claws had sliced her open pretty good. The bride hissed at her before screaming "mine" again. Daniel shook his head at Vex, knowing what she was already thinking. Vex spit blood on the floor and said, "Sorry, Danny boy, but your new girlfriend seems hell-bent on keeping you. Good luck with that, man." She turned and limped off out the door. On the brink of panic, Daniel ducked under the bride's outstretched arms and booked it for the door as fast as he could as he heard a high-pitched scream from behind him. He was about 2 feet from the door when she pounced on his back, pinning him to the floor. She rolled him over and straddled him, pinning both his hands outstretched over his head with just one massive claw. She took her other hand and clamped the sides of his cheeks together, holding his face still. Daniel stared into the veil and could make out the outline of her eyes as she peered into his. The bottom of the veil started moving, and a long gray tongue pierced its way through. It dropped thick puddles of saliva that splattered all over his chest and chin. He tried to free himself and buck her off, but she tightened her legs and her grips on his arms as her long tongue stretched out from the hole in the veil and started slithering around Daniel's face. It went across his forehead and his cheeks before patting on his tightly pressed together lips. It tried to pry his lips open, but Daniel would not open his mouth. The woman took one of her long talons and started digging it into the side of his head slowly. Daniel couldn't stand the pain and yelled out. As soon as he did, she slipped her tongue down his throat. She moaned and leaned in till her whole tongue slithered his way down his throat and her veil was pressed against his lips. After a few seconds that felt like hours, she retracted her tongue. Daniel was bug-eyed and sweaty, started coughing hard and gasping for air. She leaned in and whispered, "You're my new forever." She then jumped up and screamed to the top of her lungs before grabbing him by the foot. She took off running out of the room laughing as she dragged him behind her. He yelled out, "Let me go! Let me go!" as he slid across the stone floor. He grabbed hold of the door and held on for dear life as he slid past. She dropped his foot, turned around, and grabbed both his ankles. She yanked so hard the door broke as she whipped his body into the wall of the hallway. His head slammed against the stone and cracked open. She grabbed a leg and continued dragging him down the hallway. As he slipped in and out of consciousness, he mumbled, "Let me go, let me go," and was gripping at the ground. And then he blacked out. On the west side of the house, Lex and Max were booking it down the hallway at full speed, looking over their shoulders. Max tripped over his feet and fell. Lex stopped a few feet in front of Max and looked back. Max waved for him to go on without him. Lex ran back to his friend and helped him off the floor. Max smiled and shook his head. "You're hard-headed as hell, young blood." "Hell, I know," Lex said, once he got Max to his feet fully, "but your old ass ain't dying on me yet." They both looked back as the sound of many flapping wings grew out of the darkness. Seconds later, a wave of bats the size of small children poured onto the hallway. "Shit! We gotta go!" Lex yelled. They took off down the hallway and came to a room where the stairs led up to a giant door, and then there were some stairs that led down to complete darkness. "Which way?" Max chirped. Lex looked at both, contemplating. "Shit, man, I don't know. Down the stairs might lead to a dead end. I don't know if that door up there is unlocked." "Well, man, make a choice. Anything is better than getting eaten alive by giant man-eating bats, youngin'." They took a couple of steps forward, and a watcher walked up the steps out of the darkness. She walked right past the men, as if they weren't there, and held out her hand. All of the bats that entered the room stopped short of her and landed all over. She turned around to face the men and showed them the disc. "It is 12 o'clock, and time for a new spin." It started spinning, and after a few long seconds it slowed down and landed on the symbol of a heart. She smiled. "Do either of you fancy playing a game? Or are you having too much fun with my friends here?" She petted one of the large bats on the head, waiting for the man's response with an evil smile.